This is a journey bike, and this is also a journey bike. The Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 and the Moto Guzzi V7 Sport are two very different motorcycles, but they both share a common quality that make them outstanding journey bikes.
So what is a journey bike anyway? Well, I mentioned it in my last video, but I've come to the idea that there's a difference between something like an adventure bike and a sport touring bike and a straight up Harley bagger type thing. There's a niche in there somewhere for something called a journey bike. For me, the difference between, say, a journey bike like my V7 or my Himalayan and a straight up hardcore adventure bike like the Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro is that a journey bike is not necessarily about getting from point A to point B. It's not about getting from one place to another. It's more about getting from one space to another, one mind space. It's a journey rather than a trip, if that makes sense. On an adventure bike, if you're going on an adventure, there isn't necessarily a journey, right? An adventure just might mean you're going to go do a BDR, and that's an adventure. A journey is where you leave as one person and you come back as a different person. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. It doesn't have to be that your life is dramatically different between the time you left and the time you come back. But when you go on a journey, something about you changes. When I went on my cross-country trip last year, I had it in my head that I was going on an adventure, but what I was really going on was a journey. It didn't necessarily matter that I got from point A to point B and then back to point A. What mattered was what happened in between, and that's the journey. And of course, any motorcycle can be a journey bike, right? Just like any motorcycle can be an adventure bike. But there's one quality that I have come to learn is the most important thing when it comes to what I call a journey bike. And that can separate a journey bike from just about any other kind of motorcycle. Now, that's not to say that this one thing isn't present in a lot of bikes that I wouldn't call a journey bike. But when you put everything together and you look at a motorcycle and you think, okay, is this a journey bike? Is this something that I'm going to want to go on journeys with as opposed to adventures or road trips or whatever you might call them? And I know I'm splitting hairs here, but go with me. It'll all make sense in the end. It probably won't. But for me, there is a difference between something that I would just say is an adventure bike, like, oh, I don't know, a T7 or a Transalp or whatever, or the Tiger 900, and something like the Moto Guzzi V7 Sport or the Himalayan 450. It could be argued that the Himalayan 450 is an adventure bike, and I wouldn't disagree. But for me, I'm at a point in my life where I'm not really into adventures per se. I'm not gonna be tackling 2,000-mile long dirt roads to get to the outback or anything like that. Although I would if someone presented me the opportunity. But I'm saying in my normal day-to-day life, in my travels, in my journeys, I'm more interested in the story than I am in the crushing of miles or, the speed in which I travel. I don't care anymore about stuff like that. So I've taken a liking to a certain kind of motorcycle that I just made up a term for and called journey bike because I don't know that there's another way of describing it. To tell you what I think a journey bike is, it's probably easier to start by telling you what I think a journey bike isn't. So back in September or something of 2024 is when I bought the Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. That was the bike I intended on taking across America. We were going to go 8,000 miles on the Triumph, and we were going to have a merry old time. We were going to do dirt roads. We were going to do paved roads. We were going to do all kinds of stuff. And then I realized something. I was riding down the road one day on the Tiger, and I realized, wow, this bike bores the hell out of me. I know I mentioned this in a previous video. That's when I realized that the Tiger 900 was a fully capable and amazing adventure bike, but for me, it absolutely wasn't a journey bike. Contrast that with the V85 TT, the Moto Guzzi that I ended up taking across the country and back. And while that wasn't nearly as capable of an adventure bike as the Tiger was, it was way more of a journey bike, for me, in my eyes. And so the things that a journey bike and something like an adventure bike share, I would say, are, and none of these are necessary to be a journey bike, but when you sum everything up, they are what goes into what I consider a journey bike. Good range, I think, is super important. Comfort, I think, is super important. I like stuff like cruise control because it lets me take my mind off of one little aspect of riding and focus on the journey instead of focusing on maintaining my speed. That's neither here nor there. You may like cruise control, you may not. I prefer tubeless tires on an adventure bike or a journey bike because I don't want to get stuck on the side of the road actually taking a wheel off my bike and changing out a tube. That just doesn't seem like part of the journey I feel like experiencing. But the one thing that a journey bike has that a straight up adventure bike or a new flashy fast sport touring bike doesn't have is the ability to become part of the story. For me, a journey bike is an active participant in the story, in the journey. I know that might not make a whole lot of sense, but think of it this way. You spend hours upon hours over thousands of miles sitting aboard this collection of metal and plastic and rubber, and at some point, you're either going to form a bond with this motorcycle or you're not. It's either going to be a friend, a companion that you're taking on this adventure with you, or it's just a tool to get from point A to point B. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with prioritizing having a tool to get from point A to point B. Especially if you're just doing straight up adventure riding, right? You want the most absolutely capable thing you can climb aboard because you're going to be going into all kinds of different terrain, all kinds of different situations. But on a normal journey like I would go on, like my cross-country trip, outside of a couple of miles of dirt road where, I crashed my Moto Guzzi V85 because I'm not smart. Outside of that, it's pretty much paved roads, and the most you're dealing with is weather, not so much the terrain. And so having a super, super capable motorcycle isn't necessarily a priority when it comes to journeying as opposed to adventuring. And so that's why I think it's important for me, in my mind anyway, to separate the idea of having an adventure bike as opposed to having a journey bike. It takes some of the pressure off of you in finding the bike that you want to bond with and have as a companion on your trip, because you're not worried so much about how super capable it is. You're more worried about, are you going to get along with this thing? Are you going to want to climb back on it in the morning and get out and go through the wind and the rain and the thousands of miles and all that stuff? When I look back and think about doing my cross-country trip on the Tiger, it immediately occurs to me how bored I would have gotten of that motorcycle, how the motorcycle itself wouldn't have been part of the trip. It would have just been a tool that I was sitting on to get me from one point to another. And your mileage may vary on this because we're all different people and we all have different needs and wants and likes. But for me, I love motorcycles, and I want my motorcycle to be part of the story that I tell when I come back from this long journey. And when I came back from my cross-country trip, part of the story I was able to tell was how well I bonded with my Moto Guzzi V85 TT. Like, we became quick friends. Now, I know I ended up trading her away, and as I've mentioned previously, I do regret that. But it did get me to a point where I realized how much I like Moto Guzzi, and I ended up with my V7 here, which you would have to pry out of my cold dead hands at this point, because I love this bike. You may think this is all a bit silly, deciding to come up with a new category of motorcycle and put the 2 motorcycles that you own into that category. And you're not wrong. It is kind of silly. But for me, it's helping me understand where I am in my sort of motorcycle life, what it is that I want out of motorcycles, what it is that I'm seeking when I'm, doom scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, which I'm trying not to do so much anymore because I really don't need another motorcycle. But when I go into, Sabatino Moto over in Portland to have my Himalayan service, and I'm looking around at the motorcycles, and I see, dear God, a beautiful 2007 Triumph T100. And I think to myself, hey, this is not very expensive, and it's just sitting here waiting to come home. Does this really fit into what I would want in a motorcycle if I were to buy it and add it as a third motorcycle? And I think to myself, well, you're not into adventure bikes. You're not into cruisers. You're into journey bikes. That's your thing. Is the Triumph T100 from 2007 with carburetors and all that stuff a journey bike? Or is it just a modern classic or whatever you call it? Well, for me, even though I haven't ridden it, I would definitely consider the T100 as a journey bike. I would love to strap a bag onto the back of that thing and go make stories somewhere.
And so while it all may seem a little silly to come up with a new category of motorcycle, it's helped me understand what it is that I really want in a bike, and it's left me less apt to be wanting for anything else because I've done all the exploring through the different genres of motorcycles that I feel like doing at this point in my life. And I've finally come up with what I know I like and what I need to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And that's to make stories, to make memories, to go on journeys and come back a little bit different than when I left. That's a journey bike to me. Anyway, if you like this video, I hope you'll consider clicking the like button and maybe even subscribing. And take a look at this video over here. I haven't watched it yet, but I hear it's pretty cool. And I'll catch you on the next one.